I'll go next. I'm Jezebel Sinclair. My pronouns are she, her. I've been performing majority of my life, whether in different facets of theater. Been doing burlesque for about 10 years now. I survived solely on burlesque and sex work for probably about, I mean, sex work for ever, and doing burlesque professionally as my sole income prior to the pandemic for like 8 years. So I had to get a real civilian job whenever the pandemic hit, unfortunately. So yeah, I still do sex work and things like that. I am a fat femme. I'm queer, and obviously you can see that.
Hello, I'm Fanny Lou Fine. I am Métis Cree Dene and living here in Treaty 6 territory. I debuted in 2017, so also like same time as you did, Luna. I my very first time doing burlesque was actually in Vancouver, which was an amazing experience as a part of Teepee Confessions, which if you haven't had a chance to go, I recommend. Google it, it's amazing. They just had their first online version, which was pretty awesome. And so that was a lot of fun. And I've just been doing a lot of decolonial burlesque since then. So I'm part of Beaver Hills Burlesque. My partner and I, Pemmican Milkshake, founded that. And so we do decolonial burlesque workshops. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, we haven't been able to do as much as we normally would like to do. But yeah, I really enjoy doing that kind of stuff, teaching people beading pasties and teaching people how to bead pasties as well is part of what I like to do. It's a lot of fun, and I identify as bisexual or queer.
Thanks, folks. It's so exciting. I'm having a hard time because I just have a million questions. So, um, burlesque, I think that we would probably benefit from a little bit of a definition of how you define burlesque, because I think that there are a lot of misconceptions about what burlesque is. There's a lot of misunderstanding of the history and how it has evolved, and why you do what you do. And so maybe just take a moment and see how you can describe burlesque for us in 3 words or less. Clearly, it has to be very, very short. Totally joking. You can have 5. Go ahead.
I guess I'll go first again because I'm that bitch. Also, are we allowed to swear? Sorry, y'all. Yeah, for me, burlesque is a dance and performance art style that is rooted in both European and colonial American history. It was historically connected to vaudeville and minstrel shows, kind of the ugly history of burlesque. And it was a form of sex work. So historically, it was a place for marginalized folks, women, trans, queer people of color, all sorts of people, poor people, to earn a good living. It was sex work until the 70s, when it functionally died as an art form because it became modern stripping, and what was the burlesque art form kind of disappeared, except for in some underground corners, kept alive by people like Jenny Lee, who started the Burlesque Hall of Fame museum on her goat ranch in Palisades, I believe. And then it reemerged in the late 80s and 90s with like the Velvet Hammer in San Francisco or in LA, and then some groups in New York. And it has become this freewheeling, wild art form that at its core is sexual. The world famous Bob likes to say that it's not sex work anymore, but it is sexy work. So it's like sex work's adjacent cousin, mainly because we don't get paid like I get paid for sex work. Real tea. That's for me.
Yeah, I think just echoing again what Holly has said, like I think over time burlesque has changed as the world has changed. So where in the past it's been very like binary centered and very like woman body centered, we are seeing a lot more of that blurring of gender lines that in burlesque now. I think burlesque has always been inherently queer. Holly and I were having a conversation the other day, and we went through all of the people who had won the burlesque queen title, and they were all queer, every single one of them basically, and going over our legends and their queer history. And I think that often burlesque is not seen as queer because it is a lot of femme bodies or bodies that are seen as these sexualized bodies and commodified in that way. So we're seeing a really interesting play happen in burlesque these days with people like Luna who are blurring those lines and playing with gender and who are challenging the aspects of what burlesque is as we're moving into that neo world, and with people like Fanny who are challenging the colonial ideals of what we're seeing burlesque change from being sexy work for women into a way to challenge the narrative in the society around us.
Yay, thank you, Jezebel. Yeah, I feel like there's, well, I do want to bring up, often people will think there's a big difference between burlesque and stripping, and there's truly not. Like, it's the same activity. And like the fact that one is framed as like lesser than the other is like completely unfair. Strippers make more money than we do, so let's get that also straight. But yeah, they are understood kind of like hierarchically, but I feel like to Jezebel's point, there is like been a shift in the kind of gaze that is appealed to at some venues. I am aware that there's a certain crowd who's watching me, and I think maybe that is the difference between a lot of strip clubs and a lot of places we get to do burlesque, is the gaze with which is watching us. And as that diversifies and as bigger groups of folks can be participating in watching shows and coming down, we're going to be able to create lots of different kinds of art and not appeal to like dude bros only. None of this. But that's also why I think it's really diversified with like the online platforms, and with us being able to get into other venues and do shows in different kinds of venues. It's really brought a different kind of vibe to the art.
So everything that they just said, absolutely. But I would also add what's been important for me in my burlesque is that whenever I'm performing, I always try to have some kind of like a story, or there's some kind of like political aspect to it. And doing burlesque anyway is inherently political, and doing it as an Indigenous performer wearing beadwork on my nipples is also very, very much so political. But it's something that I always aim to do whenever I'm doing a performance. So, when I'm performing, I'm also, like saying stuff about heteropatriarchy. I'm saying stuff about white supremacy. Those are the kinds of things I'm trying to get across in performances that I bring out. And I think that that's what's really important to me about burlesque, is that you can do that kind of stuff. We can do these kinds of things and it can be really important. It can be really, powerful and moving. And it's, yes, we're stripping. Yes, we're being sexy, but like, we're also giving you the permission to watch us do that. So there's automatically like an exchange of consent there between us and between those who are viewing us. And that's something that I find really amazing about burlesque. And that's something that I think is really important about it as well.
Yeah, if I may add on to Fanny and Luna's point, as somebody who's worked as a stripper for many years, while also doing burlesque, I would say sort of the difference that Luna touched on is when you are in a strip club and when you are doing sex work, you are selling a fantasy predominantly to cis white men. If we're being honest about Alberta in particular and where we are. So you are creating sexual work and sensuality in that heteronormative mode, whereas when I do burlesque or when I approach burlesque, I am the viewer, like I am making art for myself and my communities, as opposed to shaking my ass for some men to pay me money so I can pay my rent. Like it is a difference of the viewer. It's the gaze. Whereas when I am stripping, in a way, I'm being objectified, and when I'm making burlesque, we are all the object. as opposed to being the singular objectified object on stage as a stripper. That's just been my experience with the difference between the two, which Fanny and Lena touched on, but I just wanted to add.
Yeah. The answer, Tasha, is both, but the gaze that they are referring to is definitely with the Z. I mean, it's for the gays, but it's also for the gays. Yes. Wow, like so rich. I feel like we could talk about a million different things just from how you folks have your personal approaches and connections to the work. So thank you for that. One thing I'm taking away just from the very first question is that the forefront of anti-oppression work is on stage with you as performers of burlesque because of the intentionality and the purposeful fucking with expectations that you do, and I think that's really, really cool. And also covered in like sequins and glitter, of course. So as part of Pride Week, there's sort of three broad themes that we're exploring. The first one being understanding more about queer history in Edmonton and surrounding areas. We were looking at aspects of sex positivity, and we're also looking at community care and the responsibilities we have to the people around us, which is something that it seems like the world has been struggling with a little bit right now. So, you know, let's just help each other out. So I'm wondering how that has functioned in your life, as looking at burlesque as a source or a location of community care. And we do have a question in the chat as well about parsing the difference between drag and burlesque. I know that sometimes the line can be a little bit blurred, but if that can also be addressed a bit, that would be great. Thank you.
I'm really happy to jump in on this community care topic. Community care is a huge passion in my life. I kind of live my life with the idea that my community is me and that we are each other. And the only way that I am taken care of by my community is by taking care of my community. So with any community, I think we throw the word around quite loosely often. Just because we share an interest does not necessarily mean we're community. I think that needs to kind of be defined there. We can all be burlesque performers, we can all be sex workers, we can all be people who exist on this world, we can all be queers, but we may not exist in that same community in which we care for each other in the ways that we do. I think that community care in the burlesque world specifically is a larger scale of care. It's not necessarily looking at we are friends and we take care of each other, but we are people who work in an industry who deserve rights and who deserve to be taken care of on a larger scale, and we need to be aligned on that. And then from that, we can branch into our personal communities and create relationships within those and take care of those in that overlap. So for instance, there is always a call out that happens. A venue may be not acting ideally, and players within the community choosing to play with this venue who has caused harm. So as a group of individual workers, what do we do together to create a standard of that? We go and we hold venues accountable. We create processes. We have open community dialogues and workshops in which we educate everybody or allow everybody access to the education that is being offered on different levels in order to create equity on that plane. Because equality, as stated, we're looking for equity, right? So I think for me, community care in burlesque comes down to like equitable rights as an employee from your employer. In my personal world, I offer community care in a lot of different ways with the people in my life. And I think it's a lot of what you give into that community is what you'll see received back when you're aligned with those who align with you.
Yeah, touching on what Jezebel said about, you know, we can all have these same identities, but not be a community. I've spent a lot of the last 2 years really exploring the difference between burlesque as a community and burlesque as an industry, because at the end of the day, it is also an industry, it is a job. And those two overlap. So like Jezebel said, there are people who are within my industry who are, you know, I might not even get along with. You don't have to love everybody you work with, but there needs to be a base level of respect. And oh my God, my ADHD meds just failed me, and I forgot what I was going to say after that. Oh my God. I had a really good point. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm kind of nervous. Yeah, that.
All
The
good,
community
Holly.
care-
I could always pop in if you want to
Yeah,
go back
pop
and think
in,
about it.
please.
Yeah, no
Interrupt
worries. Yeah,
me.
we can switch. And then when you think of it again, put your hand up and we'll switch. If I'm not already done. All good, all good. Yeah, like as community care for burlesque, like I have for sure, like in lots of ways I've found many people who I will love for the rest of my life, like Jezebel, like Holly. I hope Fanny, I haven't got to meet Fanny yet, but I will meet you. So, but lots of people that I care for and I share because we are a part of this community, and lots of us do come for similar reasons, especially like a lot of us queer folks like have something to express, and in that we like have a shared understanding of ourselves. And I've made like such good, lovely, witchy friends. It's a it's a good time. But that doesn't mean that everybody, yeah, who performs is coming from the same class, race, or like shared understanding of their life and what this performing style is. So some people do come in and just do it for fun and don't need to make money. Some folks, this is like, I best be getting paid, so let's make sure we figure out good venues to go to. And there does need to be a standard created around that, which can be difficult. It gets quite political sometimes. We do have lots of call outs where things get very heated because people are performing in spaces that aren't necessarily always safe for folks. And then the question of like, well, people still need to make money, so that is fair, but it does become difficult if we all want to be able to elevate ourselves together. So we do have a community of people who, for the most part, lots of people do want to listen and be heard, and of course most of us just want to be liked. So we do want to be out there and like having a conversation, but it doesn't mean that like every troupe gets along, or there's lots of people who come in and come out pretty fast. And venues is actually like I feel like one of the hardest things for burlesque. As like a person who's produced shows, I'm often not taken seriously by like white cis bros who run bars, like, and you can be treated like, sometimes you're not paid completely, sometimes it's really terrible. And even just things like it doesn't feel safe to be like around the staff can be like very uncomfortable. So it's been a hard one here with venues. When we find a good place, we like truly never leave. So if you see a lot of burlesque shows at a place continuously, it's a good sign that the people who run that place are probably decent people.
Okay, I got a strategy. Sorry. I'm just gonna write down shit. I was trying to free ball it, and that doesn't work with my disabilities. So it's community care, framing it as like the industry, separating the industry from the community, and realizing there's sort of these structural industry things, but on a community care level, on a person-to-person level, I like to adopt a harm reduction model, which, you know, I am a sober person, I am a person in recovery. Harm reduction is a big factor for me in my life. It's a big cornerstone of how I approach pretty much all my work. And when we are talking about venues, especially, not judging people for their choices that they make, but giving people the knowledge so that they are empowered to make those choices. So if you work with a venue that, say, ripped you off because they decided that the show they hired you for and decided to pay you for wasn't what they wanted because it didn't get his dick hard, not something that just totally happened to me a few months ago. Literally. Warning others of his behavior, of this bar's behavior, of the misogyny, the homophobia, the transphobia that was experienced in this venue. But if others choose to work with that venue, say, not judging them, because again, as somebody who has been a survivor level sex worker who has lived in poverty my entire life, sometimes working at a shitty venue for people who are going to misgender me, for people who are going to erase my transness, who people are going to disrespect me, can be a safer space, unfortunately. But I think in that harm reductive model and in community care, it's really trying to meet people where they're at and giving people that knowledge. Also, venues can be great. And we need to view venues not as an adversary, like it is a symbiotic relationship. We need the venues because as much as I would love to be doing burlesque in the middle of the street, it's not a practical thing. We need these stages. We need the resources. I am not a millionaire. I cannot get by a venue. I don't want to be a bar manager. I don't want to do all these things. So we do need them, and we do need to see that as a purposeful relationship between the two instead of like an adversarial relationship, as I think it often does fall into in some ways. Yeah, knowledge is power.
So I'll kind of add on there. So my experience with burlesque thus far has been a little bit different in that I haven't done as many shows. I haven't been booking a lot of venues. A lot of the burlesque that I've done has taken place in kind of, interestingly enough, more academic spaces. So performing at things, TB Confessions, and then also being asked to perform at different things at the U of A or at other institutions. And even within that, there's been some weirdness. So same thing with community care. There's been folks who don't understand the needs of what performers actually need. So, you know, when we're coming off the stage, we don't just want to stand there in our pasties and nothing while everyone's looking at us because I'm done my performance now. I mean, like, okay, to a point, but I also want to be able to go and, like, you know, maybe I have to pee, or maybe there's something that, you know, I need to take care of my body. So I need to have a space where I can go that isn't like, you know, a really awkwardly inaccessible space to go into. So some of the places where we've had to get ready or where we've been kind of placed have been really, really awkward, really uncomfortable. And so just taking care of each other in those spaces. So, because there can also be things that happen that are quite triggering when you're doing a show. You might have things that audience members might say or do, or there might be even the people who are supposed to be paying you, as Holly was mentioning, you know, there can be so many different issues and there can be a lot of things that can be very triggering. And so it's taking care of each other through that and after that and checking in. And for me too, like, I'm part of like an Indigenous burlesque community as well. So there's also the Indigenous burlesque community, and trying to find a space for that within the broader community of burlesque, and what that looks like and how to make those connections and try to come together as a community. But as you're pointing out, Holly, that like we're not all like best friends. It's not like everyone performs together, everyone knows each other. I've had some negative experiences with other performers in the city before, as we all have. So it's just like taking that time to check in with like what your situation is, like where you're situated, who are the people that you're situated with, and how are the ways that we can navigate our interrelationships within, you know, Amiskwaciyo, Skyegan, or Edmonton, how we can connect with each other in that way, and beyond, I guess.
I would like to just cycle back to that question about drag and burlesque and them living in the same world. Oftentimes we see them almost combated at each other, especially in queer spaces like your local queer bar. Maybe hosts more drag and sees drag as a viable queer space versus burlesque, and they are a little bit more tender-footed around burlesque. These two art forms were created in tandem together. Burlesque and drag were one. In the original, whatever you want to call an original, in the four founding European style of burlesque, drag and burlesque were two in one. It is only in more the nouveau or like neo style burlesque that we see this segregation happening, where we're creating this line, and that happened during what, as Holly had mentioned, that break of sex work and burlesque. That kind of also added in the further breakdown of drag out of. But we have a lot of, I used to run a very queer production company doing burlesque, and our focus was integrating all forms of performance as burlesque, because that's what burlesque is. Burlesque is a vaudevillian performance of entertainment that included nudity and stripping at times. So we want to, like, I definitely want to say that they live together, and drag performers can strip. They can do burlesque. They can perform burlesque. They don't have to exist in different realms. You can perform burlesque drag acts at a drag show, and you can perform burlesque acts at a drag show. They're both viable spaces for that, as long as we create that to be that.
Nice.
Also touching on that as, oh, sorry, Luna.
No, it's okay. You can go on.
Do you want to go? Okay. Touching on that as somebody who, as a non-binary person, exists in a world where every gender thing I do is drag for me, and especially as like a femme non-binary person, I tend to get pigeonholed as a woman. Love it. Love the shout outs on International Women's Day. Always feels great. Thanks yesterday. But yeah, that drag and burlesque, I've incorporated it from the start. Like, I have drag characters. I have this, I think the distinction for me fundamentally is burlesque, there needs to be an element of strip. The thing about burlesque that makes burlesque, for me, I am open to other interpretations because I don't know everything, is that you strip. It's like a musical, you sing. In drag, you lip sync. In burlesque, you strip. And those can combine, and you can sing and dance and lip sync and strip, and it's all wonderful and sits under those headings. But for me, that is the distinction, is when you start removing costume pieces to expose your body, to push the narrative of your art, that the stripping is the narrative, the stripping is the story. That's when it becomes burlesque for me. And burlesque is a queer art, drag is a queer art. I just spent all of last weekend being the only burlesquer in 2 different drag shows, which is great. It's fine. I love it. But yeah, I just wanted to say that. Just do more shit with my hands.
I like it. It's good. I know what's happening. It's good. It's good to talk like this in the frame. You can see it.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And you paid a lot of money for those daggers, so you might as well get the full exposure that you need. Did you ever see that, like, okay, totally derailing for a moment, but like this weird hand model from the 80s did this interview on like a nightly news, like those things, and the way that this person was talking, like they were seriously doing this the whole time to show off their hands. So now I just fully expect everyone to be doing that in this session, if you don't mind. Yes, show off your shirts. Let's see the tattoos. Yes, everybody. It's wonderful. I love it. Y'all are amazing. I love how you were talking about sort of the grapevine aspect of your work, like that, and femmes forever have been kept safe by other femmes by the bathroom wall, right? Like, we write our warnings for others on the bathroom wall, metaphorically and literally. And it feels like you have sort of formalized that and like supercharged it for the greater good kind of thing. And I really love that, how that's sort of embedded in what you do. I have a question a little bit, Holly, you touched on it a bit, but I think there's starting to be this like weird gendered idea about who participates in which art form, but that's also really weird because the entire art form is being used to push back against gender. So I wonder what that's like in your experiences, especially if for non-binary folks. How do you participate in something that's so magnified in its femininity, and sort of honor your own personal experiences that are outside of that?
Yeah, I mean, my gender journey, I spent much of my early 20s as a pinup model, running around with greasers and hot rods and living in Bakersfield. Wouldn't recommend it. except for the Buck Owens Crystal Palace, their brunch slaps 100%. I spent so much of my life like I am of an age where like being non-binary, like what was that? Like having queer icons, having trans icons. So I take comfort in being a femme. I mean, to be honest, a lot of times I willingly let myself be misgendered or viewed as a woman. It comes from working in sex work. It's a protective thing. I was out as non-binary when I was a stripper, but you sure as shit nobody was calling me they them on the floor. Like it's protection. It's an act, but I think the genderedness comes from historically burlesque, though queer, though trans, was not visibly queer and trans in a lot of ways. A lot of our trans legends, who there are so many, I've talked with these women who are in their 70s and 80s, who a lot of them are Latinas, sorry. And they did early transition, and they've shown me the scars on their bodies from like early breast implants and early gender affirming surgeries that they went through. And they used burlesque as the sex work they did to survive and to pay for these surgeries. And it was a place where they could do that. And many of these women are not out publicly. Some of them have, like the great Marinka, who passed away recently, came out in her book. She was in her 60s, 70s when she came out as a trans woman. So she lived her entire career being seen as a woman. People like Satan's Angel were seen as these outliers. Satan's Angel was a queer woman. She would kiss her assistant, who was often her girlfriend, because she did fire tassels and she needed an assistant. But that was very taboo. So I think burlesque has a very straight woman veneer, straight white woman veneer that got wrapped around it from its early inception in the early 1900s through to the 60s. It had this very white woman, thin white woman, privileged white woman veneer to it. When the truth was, like, there were so many Black and Asian and Indigenous performers, there were trans performers, there were so many queer performers. They're all gay. We're all gay. I mean, burlesque is one of the few fields where like being a straight person is a minority, which great. But I think because that veneer, not a lot of people explored it further. So now when we see it, a lot of people see it now as a very queer thing, not realizing that history, because it was as a protection, like most sex workers, like myself, and I'm sure Jezebel has done as well in her work. We do things to hide certain aspects of our identities to protect ourselves from our clientele. But yeah, for me, modernly, I am privileged that I live in a femme body as a non-binary person, and I enjoy expressions of feminist. Feminist is part of my queerness. You know, these long nails are not to attract men. Straight up, like I love my lesbian friends and culture, but like when they're like, oh, your nails, that doesn't make you gay, I'm like, this makes me so fucking gay. Like, men do not like this shit. This is for other women and other non-binaries. Yeah, I hope that answered that question of that. I think it's just we've lifted that veil in modern burlesque. We have the capability in the society that we can now rip that veil apart and actually live authentically like our forebears couldn't, I think.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think that's a really great explanation of your perspective. And Jezebel, I'll pass the mic to you in just a moment. I just I'm wondering if anyone was surprised that white folks came in and like took over something that like people of color came up with in the first place. Like, has anyone seen that happen in history before? White supremacy in the arts? What? Yeah. So obviously those are part of some really bad habits of white folks. And I'm sure you're still working to deconstruct that today. And that's I'm sure people can speak to that. But Jezebel, yeah, go ahead with yours.
Yeah. What I was going to add on here is I think it's a larger conversation about the overall body politics within burlesque. It's not necessarily about specifically just gender and about these spaces of being viewed as female, because I think it's really important to also remember that femme is not woman. Femme is queer. It is a queer identity that anybody of any gender can identify as. So saying it's a femme space actually, heated language, is hostile. You're raising femmes and you're saying that this is not what you are, right? So I think it's really important to recognize that within burlesque, it's a larger body politic conversation as somebody who is visibly fat. I step on a stage and you know I'm fat. You can't ignore the fact that I am fat and I am forcing you to watch me the entire time, and you're going to be uncomfortable and hate it because I've had people tell me that. And this here is what keeps me driving to do burlesque. I am a femme, I am hot, I am good at what I do, and I am powerful when I do it. The only reason I am able to do the things I'm able to do is because of the legends who have come before me, because of the people who have come before me. And the reason that these body politics exist in this world is at the root of white supremacy and capitalism. We cannot veer away from that. As much as we want to believe that we are political getting on stage, yes, every act that we do, because I visibly cannot hide my politicalness, because my body is politicized in every aspect, that makes my art political. But I'm going to get on stage and I'm going to be a slut, fucking rolling around, doing whatever I want and spreading my holes for you, because that's what I want to do, and that's not political. That's my art. Right? So I think it's really important for some people to say that, yes, my body is political and my existence in this art is political, but my art is not political because not everything in my life has to be politicized. Right? So I think understanding that, and understanding that as much as we want, and like I'm a white person in privilege, even though I am a marginalized identity, I have a lot of privileges that exist being white. And I am very well spoken, and with that comes that privilege. And so understanding that I am only able to feel safe to do the work I do in these worlds of sex work and performance because of the Black bodies, because of the brown bodies, because of the Indigenous bodies that came and did those work. That work and that ground in front of me is the most important thing I can recognize. And as somebody who shares my education with people after me, it's my job to use my privilege to create equitable space and say, hey, I think you should learn about histories of these other people. This is an educator who has a lived experience, so you should go to them and give them your money. And I shouldn't be telling that history. It should come from the mouth of the people who have that lineage and that experience. And I feel my positioning of privilege is that door open where that door may not have been open for them, much like they have opened the door for me to be able to stand fat and proud on a stage and be seen. Got really heated, I'm sorry.
I just want to quickly add that Jezebel is a fucking gift.
100%. Love. I'll hop in too. Yeah, so I do drag, I do burlesque, I go-go dance, which is like improvised dance, but like I guess for raves on stages. I dance on stages. I do lots of different kinds of performing. For me, like yeah, like drag like is just performing gender, and you're almost always performing gender. Like I'm always performing my gender. So I mean burlesque isn't honestly that different. Like I'm so femmy in burlesque. That's like not like as what I look like in my life. I'm like taking this ideal of like what a femme body looks like and like what this glittery glammy person I'm imagining and like elevating it and becoming part of that. And it's not something like I am all the time. It's not what I think like. Yeah, I don't know. So very, very interesting. But for drag, I found that I often do drag, and it's sometimes like more recently I'll do drag, and it's kind of more gender ambiguous. We do have performers who just say like they're drag performers rather than drag queen or drag king. And yeah, the performance style, I often like for the beginning, I don't lip sync. Like for the first few years, I like did not lip sync when I did drag. I was just like a male stripper and lived my Magic Mike fantasy, and I did that. And yeah, sometimes that could be kind of heated with other performers. They're like, why aren't you lip syncing? I'm like, no, like I just want to dance. I'm just here to dance. I've been playing with more acts as Luna and doing kind of like ballroom themed acts, kind of with voguing and with movement. And it's been beautiful to learn about. I'm so happy to learn about other queer Black folks. And I'm one of 3 regularly performing Black folks in the city, so there's not a ton of us. There's not a ton of BIPOC folks in general who perform. It's just Edmonton, but it's also all of us are, in our normal lives. I feel like a lot of people of color do have like a lot of other shit we have to do and have work to be done. And it's not like I'm excited for when I get to push into it more, but I feel like there's lots of reasons why there aren't more folks who perform who are people of color, and it is breaking down that barrier also of like seeing other people on stage who look like you. um but yeah, I often just like to dance. So for me, like drag and burlesque, like I do drag without lip syncing. I i do i perform as my burlesque name, but sometimes don't strip because I'll like be at different venues or like, yeah, like go dancing. But like, or I did a party queens show and I was Luna, and I like, yeah, did kind of like a ballroom-esque act. So I feel like a lot of like I've been moving into a space where I just like to perform, and like drag and burlesque is an avenue to just like do queer art that can maybe be like not necessarily just like burlesque or drag as we know them, but kind of, I guess, like, yeah, like just like a performance art like vignette. There, that's the fun word. But yeah, it can be so much. Sometimes we'll go to shows and performers will have serious acts. Sometimes they'll have singing, dancing, creating, they're singing themselves. There can be a lot of variance. And especially like as I explore, like I'm like quite a spiritual person as well. And like there's I've done acts where I do like have like an intentionality with the space and with the audience, and I get them to do a few deep breaths with me and think about our ancestors and think about that black magic and think about that good. And like a lot of dancing styles like shake dancing that is kind of related to go-go dancing was something that like African slaves bought over, and like lots of people like did as like a purposive ecstasy kind of like excited dance. It like has its roots in African dance and it has its roots in ceremony. And it's beautiful and interesting to be able to share that moment of ecstasy with people. And like the height of like a lot of different like Ifa traditions in Africa is just like trying to get possessed by like that dancing spirit. So sometimes you do feel that flow and movement. And I don't really like, I guess a lot of my performance style isn't really drag or burlesque. It is just kind of like dancing and being queer and bringing out that queer art for anyone who wants to watch. But yeah, Fanny.
So I agree with a lot of what's being said in that a lot of like burlesque and drag, they're not separate. They are very much so the same. Like who I am as Fanny Lou Fine is different than who I am in my everyday life. So when I'm becoming Fanny, I'm going into drag. The way that Fanny is styled, the way that Fanny likes to move, I don't move like that in my regular life. Like I can go through a routine and I can rehearse it and practice it and practice it. But the moment I get on stage, I move differently. So Fanny moves in a different way. And I find I can't even be fully become Fanny until I'm on the stage and I have the energy of the audience and I have that energy going through me. I dance in a way that I can't do normally. And so it's just, and I'm sure other performers have the same feeling. Like it's you get on there and then that's when you fully become who you are as a performer. And so I'd say that, burlesque is drag is burlesque. I've also been very interested in starting to do some drag king type stuff. I have a particular character who I want to become, and I have this whole like way that I want them to move, and I'm pretty excited to explore that in the future.
Yeah, sorry, I just thought of like Fanny. Yeah, when you bring up like the character like Lucian that I made, like did have a very specific movement. And I realized later after performing as Lucian for a while that it was the only time I felt comfortable doing hip hop acts, like at shows at the beginning. Like before, I was like, I'm like the only Black person. I'm not gonna like be a minstrel and do hip hop and be the only one dancing to that kind of music. And it felt like very uncomfortable. And it wasn't until I like got to be Lucian and got to like be like a sexy Black man and just like own that I could like, I felt more comfortable performing to like hip hop and R&B and like that Black kind of performance. So I can imagine like, yeah, like it'll be fun to play with, like, yeah, it's that movement style does change. Like it's like assertive in a different way, but it's also like a very fun thought experiment for me to think like, what kind of mask person would I want to be? Like, what are the traits that I find like appealing? What is like this kind of energy that I feel like I already kind of have in me, and it's just nice to have like an outlet for it.
I'm so moved listening to you folks talk. This is really beautiful. And Jezebel, especially as a fat woman, fat femme, I really identify with a lot of what you're saying. And that's a whole separate conversation that we could have next year at Pride, is being fat and queer. But I think that's something we should definitely explore. There is a question in the chat from Ashley, who's wondering more about decolonizing, specifically looking at that framework, decolonizing the art form, and what that looks like in practice. The question is for you in particular, Fanny, but of course it is open to everyone as well. But yes, how do you intentionally, I mean, okay, Fanny, for you, you probably don't have to think really intentionally about decolonizing. It's probably part of your viewpoint. But how does that manifest in your practices, folks?
Sure. So I can give an example of something that is decolonial in practice. So there was a particular dance that I wanted to do, and it involved kind of like going against pushing back, I guess, against the church for a lot of things that have happened to Indigenous people. And I had thought that, you know, there's like, oftentimes you see like the sexy nun, or you see things like that, and it's a trope. A lot of people do that. And I thought, oh, that might be kind of fun to incorporate. But then I was having a conversation with one of my elders, and she mentioned to me how her husband has still, every time that he sees a nun, even around like Halloween or in costuming, when he sees someone wearing a nun outfit, it's very triggering for him and it's very traumatizing. And so then I thought, for me as an Indigenous person, to not use that in a performance, even though for some folks it might be you know, very it could be cathartic in some ways to see that getting ripped off and see what that's going to happen, like how I'm going to say I'm taking off the church, or I'm not going to have this tie to Catholicism anymore. But at the same time, I have to think about my community, and I have to think of like that care piece, and how I wouldn't ever want to get up there and do something that's going to potentially cause someone out there who's watching me as an Indigenous performer. When I'm performing, and folks know that I'm an Indigenous performer, I'm more likely to have Indigenous folks come to watch me. And so if I have someone in there who's going to be traumatized by something that I'm doing on stage, where I'm thinking, oh, this might be like something kind of fun to play with, I have to change my tactic. So rather than doing that, I changed the entire performance, how I had envisioned it. And instead I did something involving a Bible that wasn't actually a Bible. It was a book written by someone pretending that he was Native. Anyway, it was just, and it was a fun time. I took off, I made it look like a Bible. Inside the Bible was actually a book of sexual poetry by Tennille Campbell called Indian Love Poems. So it looked like I was getting turned on in the performance. Wasn't the Bible. It was actually Indigenous poetry. And then I threw away the book after they'd seen that it was a book written by someone who's pretending to be Indigenous and is not, in fact, an Indigenous author. So those kinds of things are very decolonial. So we're taking those things and we're turning it into a performance. It's also decolonial in the fact that the way Indigenous women, how we are viewed by settlers, by just, you know, white people in general, but in society, is viewed as not even having the ability to be human, seen as less than human, seen as disposable You see what's happened with murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls in Canada and beyond, and how there's so much disregard for our bodies. And so by doing this and showing our bodies and talking about these things, and for me, I talk about wearing beadwork. Wearing beadwork on my body, how for me, like, that's a decolonial act. And a lot of times, I think of a performance in particular that Pemmican did, where she had the Métis sash involved. And then you're always going to get someone too who's going to be like, oh my gosh, you can't do that with the sash, like it's sacred, or things like that, which anyway. But it's just like incorporating those kinds of things. So I don't know if I'm like just kind of snowballing, but it's all of those things to me make it decolonial in nature. And then just making sure that there's the community aspect, but also how we can incorporate our culture, how we can bring that into what we are doing, how we can I guess make space for Indigenous folks to be part of this art form. I hope I've answered the question. I kind of went on a rant there.
Thank you for that. I'll let the question asker see if there's anything clarifying. You don't have to unmute. If you want to put it in the chat, that's fine. But go ahead.
That was great. Thank you.
Wonderful. I like what you said about making space. I think that's a really important conversation that we need to have more often when we're engaging in anti-oppression work, is what the difference is between making space, holding space, and passing the mic. And those are things that can take a lot of practice to understand the nuances of. But I love the emphasis is just on the responsibility you feel to do things right. And that's something that I hear from all four of our panelists, that there's more considerations to be made other than character and costuming, because you seem to embody that duty of care, which is so refreshing. But it's also just seems like that is the expectation. Obviously, the bar is not always met, but that you hold each other accountable. And that's something that I think is really, really fantastic. I want to pause and make sure that I'm not skipping over anything from the audience here. If you have questions, please. They don't need to be all mine. And I wanted to make sure, panelists, how are you doing? Do you need a break? Can I offer you a hero cookie from afar? You're good? Yeah, okay. So I'm wondering if there are things about that you have been dying to have a platform for about burlesque, and that you just really, really wish people knew, or what do you need to shout into the void about burlesque right now? Uh-oh. I see some deep breaths happening.
Pay us. Fucking pay us. Pay us what we're worth. Pay us fairly and equitably compared to all other art forms. I have spent 14 years of my life. I came out of university with a degree and went, I'm going to become a stripper. And a broke stripper, because I chose burlesque. I got into burlesque before I got into stripping and sex work in that way. Pay us and acknowledge us as artists. Oftentimes I have been the burlesque performer in cabaret spaces with more serious art and performance art and clown, and I love that shit, but like, it is awkward, and you often are not respected because our art is seen as degraded, like most non-mask heteronormative art is devalued. But even within the queer hierarchy, the cis white men who generally are the avatar of drag shitting on what is considered a female art or a trans art or a non-binary art in those spaces, the disrespect within queer spaces that I have encountered as a non-binary femme. Serenity now. I won't get into it, but like, fucking pay us, respect us, listen to us, and listen to sex workers. And if you are within burlesque and you are not respecting and listening to sex workers, what the fuck are you doing? Like, also, please stop using the word classy when referring to burlesque. Like, fuck off. We are not classy strippers. I am not classy. I am not. I am a clown, both literally and metaphorically. I am a goblin. Pay me respect as a slutty goblin, but like, fuck you. Stop saying classy. Stop saying we're brave. Stop saying I'm brave for getting on stage, especially for fucking people of color and fat bodies. Stop saying they are brave for doing this art form. We are not brave. We are artists. We work fucking hard at our craft, and we deserve your respect. And I will throw hands at the next person who describes burlesque as classy. Stop it. Sorry. That was my rant. My little rant.
I think for me, my biggest thing is I have a lot of feelings on this. As somebody who has like a marginalized and oppressed body, that I have literally had people tell me they have not and will not hire me because they don't believe I can garner the money they want. I have people who pay me a lot of money to do a lot less. So the thing is I really, if anybody can leave this conversation or go into burlesque with anything, is take the power away from privileged bodies. Get them off the stage. They don't need it. They have the stage everywhere else in their life. They can do without it in one place, or maybe just give them a little less, because they literally have everything everywhere in life. And I just want there to be more oppressed and marginalized bodies being given an opportunity to have money and autonomy over the way their bodies are viewed. In burlesque, in performance art, I have autonomy over my body and the message that it shows. And that is one of the only spaces I get that. But to be told that I am not a viable option for casting when I have over 17 years of experience on a stage is ridiculous. When I have over 12 to 13 years in sex work where men pay me money to literally sit there and look cute and say, ooh, hi, daddy. Really? You're going to tell me I can't garner wages because you don't like the way my body looks. So take your personal opinions off our bodies and look at what that person can offer and bring into that space that space currently does not hold. And I think that if you can take anything away from anything and bring it into the burlesque world, is to challenge your ideas of what is good, because at the end of the day, good doesn't exist. Good art is non-existent. You don't have to be good to do burlesque. You just have to do burlesque or want to do burlesque or feel empowered in that space. So literally take power away from privileged people and give it to those who deserve it, aka the people who have been oppressed and marginalized. And also pay me a lot of money to show my body because I'm baby and I deserve a lot of money to look cute.
Love, just gonna keep on echoing the money train, but there's lots of reasons. I mean, love, like burlesque and performing is a way I cultivate like my understanding of beauty. And as we like get on more stages and people start seeing us, they see like the beauty that I get to cultivate and I get to decide, and how we see ourselves, and break down like those stereotypes of what you think I should look like or how I should move or what I should dress like. And in certain spaces you can also cultivate. I've had the privilege of getting to be a producer, which is amazing. I get to cultivate what like I want the show to look like. Sometimes you try to hire people, it's hard to hire people, but as much as you can, to the point about decolonization, like I feel like I produced a show for a while called Wokothuin, and it was an all indigenous cast. I didn't pay myself because I have no right making money from other folks' art, but it was something that I felt like I have the space to cultivate, and I was happy to be able to make that space, to literally make that space where people can get paid for their art and get paid a good amount of money for creating, for telling their story, for that labor that really goes into that, because it's not always just like, sometimes I do acts and they're fun and frivolous and I'm just sexy, but sometimes it is like a huge labor of love and it's emotionally draining. And sometimes I plan an act that's fun and frivolous, but then my life is messed and I'm like very sad that I'm not doing a sad ass act because it doesn't match. But there's always that work there. And to make it look effortless, like you have to like put in a lot of yourself. So creating that space, giving people space to create that art, when you have that privilege, and no matter what that looks like, all of us have a different amount of it and we can do as much as we can with it. But elevating other people who are in your community, but just like the community of like people around us, like not just like the burlesque community, but sometimes, yeah, I've like brought in performers who are poets. I had a performer once, we had to have like a kind of separate space in the grindstone and not bring in alcohol, but I had a performer do powwow for one show as a variety show. And you can cultivate, like, you can really, as long as you keep your horizon of what you want it to be really open and not have it rigid, you can like create beautiful art that people do want to see. They just don't know they want it.
That's so awesome. That's amazing that you've done that, and I would love to see that. So I guess just kind of echoing, yeah, the pay thing, obviously super important. Like it's just like we can't say it enough. I've even, had people be like, oh, like I do a lot of community theater as well. I love to perform, and I've had people ask me if I could come in and do like a body movement workshop for some theater folks for free, like just because they know that I do burlesque. I'm like, no. So it's like, just pay us for what we're worth, pay us for what we do. And then I also just kind of want to echo what you were saying there, Luna, too, that just give space for BIPOC performers. BIPOC performers are just as incredible and just as amazing as white performers. And so much of burlesque is white. And so much of burlesque too, I've seen, white performers doing things that are, cultural appropriation, or you see things that are brought in, right? So like calling those people out when they do that kind of stuff, it's so frustrating to see, because you can see an amazing show and everyone's amazing, and then one performer gets on and it just leaves a bad taste in your mouth because you've seen, that they're doing something. You're like, come on, like why was that necessary? So those are the things that for me are like what I would want to say about burlesque.
I would love to also add just here, I know I'm very heated and being like, give me space, make space for me. But I do want to note that like burlesque is a really beautiful space. While there, with any community, with any spaces, there's always going to be areas that can be improved and be better. But I think that it's also really important to like point to of like, I have learned so much about myself and my relationship with my body through being engaged and active in this art form. And like through having fellow fats who are also burlesque performers to be like, oh, you feel the same things I do. Like I've felt the most seen in burlesque spaces. And if anybody is listening to this right now being like, I think burlesque is cool, but I'm hearing about like, you're not getting paid enough. And like, you're hearing like, there's no spaces for you. Like, those are just the downs, but the ups are so much bigger. Like Holly is one of my best friends, and like they know everything about me, and I would have never met them without burlesque. And like I have been able to grow and heal so much from learning from like words that Luna has shared, and like being able to become a better person has been contributed by burlesque because of the like really interesting intersectional community that exists on this plane where we all share give me space, pay me, but there's so much bigger than just that.
Yeah, and touching on that, like we are kind of doing the like getting our feels out, but like burlesque saved my life in very many ways. The people I've met through burlesque, I am so honored to call Jezebel one of my best friends, and we live down the street from each other and have shared some wild times in weird hotel rooms together. And like Luna's one of my co-producers, and that has been such a joyous occasion to have like Luna enter a space and co-produce with me, and a third co-producer we have. and getting to meet Fanny, who I didn't know, and hearing about New Burlesque in the City. And one thing I will say, like, I've been doing this, in May will be 14 years of doing burlesque. When I started doing burlesque, there were 3 troupes. You had to be in a troupe. And I was like, I say I'm one of the first soloists in Edmonton. And it was literally because my troupe broke up and I just asked my friends who were in punk bands, can I dance burlesque in between your sets? Literally, it'd be like a weird, terrible Celt punk band and like a grindcore band. And I'm in the middle dancing to like Little Red Riding Hood and like rockabilly songs in like terrible Licenza underwear with not a speck of sparkle. But I do want to encourage people who are into this is like, fucking make those spaces. Edmonton has come so far. Alberta has come so far. Calgary has come so far in the years I've been doing this in the work. And like, I want to shout out the work people in Calgary are doing. Like, I see a Calgary performer here in the chat, and the people they work with, and like people like B. Lisma, who is just like fucking busting down doors and doing the work. Like, do that for yourself. Make those spaces. Burlesque is also so punk rock. Burlesque is DIY. Claim those fucking spaces. If there is not a table, make your own fucking table. Breaks, like maybe not break somebody else's table. Like if they're being terrible and only casting like thin cis white women, yeah, break their fucking table and take it and make it your own table. But like find those spaces, reach out. And also like circling back, something I have done is like, I am a white person, very obviously. I am quite thin bodied. I have a lot of passing privilege in my life, like so much passing privilege in my life, which, you know, has its own shit. But like something that I've done as an educator and a leader in this community, whether I want to be one or not, is to try to give resources. I give my time to community members. I do sliding scale for all my teaching for so much of my work as a way to make it accessible to people who might not have those resources. And passing the torch to be like kind of what Jezebel said, being like, if I'm a white person, I can't speak to a lot of lived experiences, especially for BIPOC folk, like passing that torch to people who can and being like, pay those people. But yeah, there is a lot of joy in burlesque and there is a lot of these things. And, you know, I've stepped down from spaces and been like, you know, I don't need the space. I've been doing this for 14 years. Let's give this space to somebody who needs that stage more than me. And that seeing that happen amongst my fellow people who I'd consider sort of my immediate peers, people who came up, who have been doing this as long as me, who have this sort of, like, I am a big producer. I used to run the Edmonton Burlesque Festival. I founded the Edmonton Burlesque Festival with people like, that comes with a lot of privilege and also a lot of trauma. But like, knowing that I have that, my cohort that I came up with, watching them go on the same journey of being like, oh fuck, we don't need these spaces as much. Like, there are other people, and having the honor of being able to cast people like Luna and cast people like Jezebel, and literally having other like people who are like venues and like higher up producers be like, you know, that coded like, we want them thin and we want them white, and being like, well, I'm going to give you some black people and some fat people, and then them walking away and going, holy shit, that was incredible. And me being like, yeah, they're really fucking good. And their art is really fucking good. Now pay them money. Now pay me money. Now pay them more money. And I did see a question in there about pays. To quickly touch on that. We have worked really hard in Edmonton to do a $50 an act minimum for pay on average, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it was a lot better when I have literally been paid $17 for a show. Like, so we do negotiate our own rates. We're our own agents, we're our own managers. We are oftentimes our own producers, but as a producer, like as a performer, my minimum is $50 to leave the house. Like, I'm not leaving my bed for less than $50, because I can make more than $50 without leaving my bed. Just saying. But like, we also negotiate our own stuff, and yeah, I try to, as a producer, pay as much as I can. I try to do at least 100 a minimum of an act if I can as a producer, but also realizing that like I am a poor person, and if the show doesn't go well, that's me paying out of pocket. And as a producer, I have paid hundreds of dollars out of my own pocket when a show hasn't gone well, because at the end of the day, the performers get paid, and they get paid what they're worth. So that's to also touch on that. And now I'm going to do weird hand things and mute myself.
Yeah, I think if you are interested in getting into burlesque and wanting to know what you should get paid, ask around. Ask other performers. Like, we're pretty transparent here about being what we get paid. I also charge a premium if I'm the only fat body. You're tokenizing me. You've decided that I am checking a box for you, whether or not it's intentional. I will ask who else is on the cast. If not one of them is a fat body, then I will give you my premium rate. If you have other fats on the cast, I will talk to them and I will see what they have negotiated for their rate and often say maybe we should ask for more. So definitely know your worth. In Edmonton, a lot of folks, producers will come with a fee, and that is yours to navigate. My experience as of late, post-pandemic, has been anywhere from 75 to 200 per act. So kind of navigating in that realm, but I think the more transparent, and this goes back to the community care, right? The more transparent we can be with each other about how much we're getting paid and how we negotiate those, and offering like equitable access to how to negotiate and ask, would be something that I would encourage people to do. Like, challenge it if you feel like you're in a place to, or reach out to peers and see if they're able to help with that.
That's great. Thank you so much. I love how you like co-negotiate your pay. That's just so beautiful. We do have one last question in here before we want to tie things up, and it's a question about boylesque, because it is a growing field, which is very interesting. So the question is, what would you ask of men and masculine folks entering this feminine-led and pioneered art form? What are your expectations? What are your standards for the men folk who are coming into these spaces?
I'll start. So I feel like, well, I mean, welcome back. We've missed you. Yeah, no, I'm excited for it to be like taken up. I feel like I love like boylesque shows when I get to go to them. A lot of things, though, like the things that can be weird or like don't make like slut jokes or a weak aside. Sometimes it's appropriate, sometimes it's dicey, like kind of jokes that I guess debase like the other genders that perform. None of this, but I feel like that's an easy enough ask. And then yeah, like just act accordingly in dressing rooms and be chill and fun. And if you're het and straight, be cool and nice, and maybe like don't just automatically ask out everybody in the space, but you get to know people, and just like like a natural foregoing, then things can happen. But yeah, that retaining, I guess, that like openness and understanding that all of us are here and learning things, and you want to be as welcoming and as open as you can to learning. And like all of us, like we still have lots of learning to do, but yeah, learning about and ask questions. Yeah, ask those questions, ask those weird awkward questions. Let us help you like get into weird uncomfortable situations and be vulnerable with us. That's like, well, it's a lovely thing to do with all people.
Yeah, I think, thank you for asking this question. I think it's a great one for sure. For me, in my experience of hiring every gender, all the genders, my biggest thing of working with men and masculine folk is just know your space, right? Maybe it's not a place to swing your dick around and say you have the biggest one in the room, right? So like being humble and understanding what the space calls for at that time. Also, if you are a cis het, or even just a heterosexual person in general, watch your queer baiting. Burlesque is a queer space. If you are performing for that male gaze and asking for that male gaze to be upon you, realize what you're doing with that. It's no different than leading on somebody in a relationship, leading somebody with that idea. We were creating fantasies in this industry, and I think understanding your privilege as a cis person or a het person more so. It's not so much about being cis. Anybody can be heterosexual, but being a heterosexual person and understanding what that lens is and whether or not you're queer baiting. And if you don't know what that means, Google. But definitely checking yourself on that, and also checking in with the producers. As a producer, I really love when somebody's like, hey, I'm gonna be like a man or a penis having person in this place, whatever you feel is the uncomfortable piece of that identity, is there something you would suggest for me to navigate? Right? And then like if you're sharing a space with bodies that maybe aren't comfortable with your body in it, just checking in like, hey, is everyone okay with me here? Is this okay if I'm over here? Hey, I'm going to be taking my clothes off right now in the change room. Is everyone okay with that? I'm going down to like nothing. Is everyone okay with that? I think over communicating doesn't hurt, especially while you're building those relationships. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, to add on to that, really, like, burlesque works really hard to cultivate a culture of consent, which in my long times doing this has not always been around in burlesque or the wider society, everywhere. But yeah, that consent, that like, and I think that can go for not just men or het folks, just like everybody. Like, hey, I'm gonna be changing. Hey, I'm gonna be shooting hairspray. I do that backstage with drag queens. I'm like, is it okay if I spray my hairspray? And they look at me like I have 7 heads, because they're like, yeah, hairspray is life. But like just those small consent check-ins. I think the boylesque thing, I've seen a lot of conversations in my years doing this about even just like, why do we need the category of boylesque? Because burlesque, as a non-binary performer, the idea that boylesque is its own separate category is inherently patriarchal, because it's saying that men folk need a separate space, and that inherently says that anybody who is not a man or identifies as a man is something else, is othered. And part of burlesque is we are trying to break down those concepts of othering within our community. So I mean, and again, if it's a label that feels right to you, who the fuck am I to say? You know, I identify as a trash goblin. That's my identity. But yeah, just be really aware of that. A lot of folks who come into burlesque come in with a lot of trauma. I mean, most people have trauma, but there are so many marginalized voices and oppressed voices in burlesque, and that those people have experienced those traumas oftentimes at the hands of men. And so being aware of that, and being aware that your presence can be challenging for some people. So being communicative with the producer, being communicative in the space, being open. What Jezebel said about queer baiting, I have also noticed because I don't just perform in Edmonton, I've performed across North America, I've performed all over Europe. Men get paid more inherently. Men get booked more, they get paid more. Watching my male peers, or even non-binary peers who present more mask, or who were assigned mask at birth, assigned men at birth, who have a more masculine lived experience, they get paid more than I do. They get better opportunities than I do. They get treated better than I do. And I have seen that over and over again. People that I love and respect, who are put in those boylesque boxes, who literally I have watched opportunities be taken away from me and given to them. Mainly because also in those queer spaces, so many queer spaces are run by cis men, and in particular run by cis white men. And they want to put people on stage they want to fuck. Because all venue owners, I'll say like 80% of venue owners just want to put people on stage they want to fuck. I mean, it's the human condition. Most people want to fuck. And if you don't, that's also great. Love it. But I have seen those opportunities, especially in queer spaces, that I have lost as a femme, as a non-binary person, to men and to straight men. And it like straight white men who come into our house and fucking break their table. Like, just so be cognizant of that. Like, touching back on that payment, ask what the femmes you are working with are getting paid, the women you are working with are getting paid, other oppressed identities you are working with are getting paid. And if you're getting paid more than them, ask why. Call that shit out. Advocate for them to get paid more. So be aware that, like, you will have opportunities given to you purely because you are a man. And be aware of that. And burlesque has had men, has had trans men, has had that experience, is part of the DNA of burlesque. And it makes me sad when we have to have these conversations about, especially about cis het men not being as welcome, because they should be welcome. And there is that fundamental break in behavior that does cause them to feel not welcome. And I have talked to cis men who authentically are like, I want to do burlesque, but I don't want to step on toes. And I always go, that's a good instinct. So yeah, just be aware of that. I had another thought, but I got feisty about breaking tables. Sorry, I just like to smash shit. But yeah, there are so few men in burlesque still, proportionately. Yet I see them given so many opportunities and so many stages. Like if you look at the Burlesque Hall of Fame weekend, which is like the Burlesque Oscars in Las Vegas, it's also the big reunion for all of us little strippers. The women's category for Queen is like 15, 16, 17 people. The Boylesque King title is like 4. And even some of them, you're like, really? Because you are getting those opportunities because it's a pure numbers game. And because they want it to seem fair between the two genders. These hypothetical two genders I keep hearing about, which, nay. So yeah, just be aware of the space, be conscious. Definitely ask before you whip your dick out. Also, my one final rant. Try not to make your name a dick joke. So many Boylesque performers make their name a dick joke, which may seem inherently makes sense, because you see a lot of vagina jokes as names, but it carries a different weight. And I have definitely and try not to make your name rapey, which I have also seen. Not to call them out, there is a performer in Toronto whose name a little copophilia. Like, don't name yourself Copophilia. Just don't. That's not a good name. So yeah, those are my tips. Just yeah.
Also, on the topic of names, don't put somebody else's genitals in your name or in part of their anatomy. A lot of folks, I've seen people use hymen in their name as a man, and I think that should not be happening. So understand that your name holds weight and power, is a huge one. But I would love to hear Fanny's thoughts on this.
I'm slowly disappearing as the light is going. I'm sitting by my one good window and I'm just it's getting darker and darker. But yeah, just echoing what other folks have said, what you brought up there, Holly, about wondering why there even needs to be the category of boylesque. That was the main thing that popped into my mind when this question was asked. Why do we need a separate category for it to be boylesque specifically? And then it just brings me back to the conversation we're already having about drag and how drag and burlesque are inherently just tied to each other. Boudoir? Yeah. Sorry, it came up in the chat. Boudoir. Nice. So I think it's just echoing what other folks have said, just being aware of the privilege that you hold, being in a male viewed body. Sorry, my words are escaping me, but being the privilege that you have being born with a dick between your legs. So what does that mean? Being aware of that, and also just making sure that you're not taking space from other people, that you're not coming in and thinking that you're going to run the show and that you're going to make everything about you, because we see that happen a lot. I haven't had the privilege of performing with male-bodied performers as of yet. I've seen shows. I saw actually a show you guys put on a while ago. I'm pretty sure there was a male performer in that, but I haven't had a chance myself to. Maybe I could be misremembering, but I've been to. Pardon?
Was it Beau Creep?
I have seen Beau Creep. I don't know
Yeah.
if it was the same show, but I have seen Beau Creep. But I've definitely seen you perform. But anyway, Cyrus, if you have a chance to see any of them perform, please buy tickets to their shows. Amazing performers. 10 out of 10, would go again, would pay them extra money, get the tip, like all of that. But anyway, yeah, just echoing what you guys had to say. I think I feel the same about it. I don't know that I have any riveting insight to offer beyond what was already said.
Well, unfortunately, we have run out of time. This has been a wonderful conversation. I feel privileged to have been in your presences collectively and virtually. And I think that you've given us a lot of things to think about, and just about how we embody ourselves and how we can step into it in different ways. I'd love to explore opportunities to work and collaborate with you folks in different ways. And I want to give a couple shout outs to events we have happening later on this week. On Friday night is Streaming with Pride, produced by Fruit Loop, in which we have 3 out of 4 of our panelists are performing in. So make sure that you watch. It's going to be amazing. And that's about it from me. I will stay on here to make sure that everyone can read the chat. And I just wish you all a wonderful evening. Happy Campus Pride. And thank you for sharing your stories and your voices with us tonight. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Jessica, for reaching out to ask me to help plan this. And thank you to the panelists for being a part of this and being amazing, and everybody who came and watched. And yeah, I'm open to keep any of these conversations going. I put my Insta up in there, so hit me up. If I don't hit you up right away, you're probably in my other folder, which I do periodically check. But if you have any questions, reach out. Yeah, there will be shows. We all have lots of shows. Come and support us. And I know I'm a teacher. Jezebel does teach on occasion. Luna teaches. Like, you want to get into burlesque, reach out. Fanny, I'm sure there's I would love to learn shit from you as well. I also love you got this beautiful glow, Fanny. You're just like,
Oh my gosh, right?
It's like a music video from the late 80s, and I'm very into it. Like a soulful singer from the late 80s.
I was channeling late 80s, early 90s vibe tonight, so thank you.
Yeah, no, I see it. It's very
right
Sinead O'Connor. Nothing compares to you right now. I love it. I'm here for it.
Yeah, gorgeous.
Yes, thank you for having me. Super appreciative. I am curious. What was your first esoteric show you went to? Which one was it?
Oh gosh, it was.
Oh, is your name typoed? I don't know how to say. Is it Sullivan?
Yeah, it's a typo. It's Sullivan. I saw the one that Cage Wolf came to.
Yeah, the one at Luna was in that one. Our queer show. It was our pride show where I did my Holly Vonson tribute.
Yeah.
Amazing. I'm really excited to see you perform in Calgary. I follow you on socials. So I'm very excited to see you perform and come up.
Yeah, Sullivan, put your social media in the chat too, please. Fanny, did you just write now?
I literally just made it because I will forget. I am probably the worst when it comes to social media, and I have different parts of me that I like to show on social media. So I have the private me. I also I sing, so I've got that part, and then I've got I do beadwork. And so now I just finally made my burlesque one. So thank you for making me make that today.
I love that because I've been wanting to tag you, Fanny. I've been who is she?
She doesn't exist.
Who is this human? And wanting to know more. So thank you for doing that so I can stalk you further.
I love that we're witnessing the birth of a brand new, beautiful relationship. This is fantastic.
You're witnessing the birth of my Instagram while also watching me slowly disappear in the dark here.
I feel like I need to write some really dark poetry about like your particular rectangle on my screen, just what I have been witnessing.
I want to write like a beautiful love poem to it. Like it's like watching a full moon set at the end of the night. Like you've given us the gift of your light, and now you're just like beautifully receding over the horizon.
But like both reflecting the light from the sun and also creating her own. I'm not really sure the physics of that, but
it's Fenty highlighter.
It's Fenty
that's what
highlighter.
it is.
It's science. It's Fenty highlighter. Amazing.
I am also wearing Fenty highlighter. Also, Luna, you have a
That's fun.
similar vibe going on. I love it.
Yeah,
love
right
it
now.
too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like I feel like
The
we
good
need
window.
to chat more. We need
Yes.
to. We'll do
She
some
blinded
stuff.
us with science. Yes.
We'll just hang around here.
Yeah, and I would love to host more conversations with you folks. Like, I want you to know that I will create platforms for you whenever you want. I might not be able to host shows in the way that you're used to doing, but if you need a channel to get your voice and stories out, please come to me. Like that, my whole job is what do you need and how can I do it for you? So these are stories that more people need to hear and understand and be pushed differently. And what a powerhouse you folks have been tonight. I'm having my it's Pride Week and I'm really weepy day today, you know, and like the spirit and the feels and
Cry. I love a good cry.
Yeah,
It makes me feel good.
I'm gonna do
It makes
that.
my body fresh.
I love a good pride. Not a fan of a corporate pride.
Yeah, our pride is rad. Our
Yeah.
pride is amazing.
Your pride is so great. I've got to do it a few years now, and it's been a blast every time.
We're glad to have you. Yeah. And look at all these folks who get to have all this extra time.
Right.
Our beautiful interpreters, you're off the hook now if you'd like to be. You did an outstanding job, and 2 of the interpreters today were students. And like seamless. Congratulations on being so good at this level as students. Like bravo. Could I ask a couple questions though? There were some words I was hoping to see. There was one sign you used for fuck that I found really interesting to watch, and what you decided on for the sign for burlesque, and how do I say I am a slutty goblin in sign language?
It's like a lot of spelling.
A lot of Yeah, because I had to ask today. I asked a couple of friends who have knowledge in ALS what burlesque was, and found out. I also found out what the 2 signs for stripper are. That a friend informed me. Which one is just like unbuttoning your shirt, just stripper, and then the other one is, and that's like going down a pole. And I love that. Like yes, pole. Thank you so much.
If you're in Edmonton, I do want to shout out the Metro hosts a lot of shows for us, and I know that Holly has a show up. I think Luna has a show coming up there. I have a couple shows coming up. You know, I do, Luna.
Do you? Because me and Luna are waiting for that email.
Oh, I have that show, and then I have other shows, and then I'm going to Camrose. Baby's back.
Hey, where in Camrose? I grew up there.
I don't know. It's a corporate gig. Also, get that corporate gig money.
Truly, it sucks, but make that like kind of sanitized, like pretty glitzy act. Sell that bitch for money, because that will get you through the lean period.
A panel and boa with a corset and bra will get you like $300.
Mm-hmm.
So like easy build and act you can toss away for those moms.
And they love it. Some of my best audiences truly are the ones that I'm like, we're gonna die in this town. Where you're like, okay, buddy system for the bathroom, so that like Sylvan Lake, 3 hills, 2 hills. I performed
Twin Butte.
That was so much. I performed on the Air Force Base in Cold Lake for a New Year's show one time. Me and Bo Creep and a few other folks, some of who don't perform anymore. But like they paid the Canadian like Air Force paid us so much money, and we were like, we will not get murdered on this Air Force Base today. Like we were a bunch of gay people And they like paid us and they treated us so well. And those soldiers loved the fuck out of us. Like, especially Bo. Like,
Holly and I did a gig with Cabaret Calgary, and we went to Twin Butte with them, and it was like myself, Holly, Belissima, who is like a person of color, Carla Marks, and then their partner, Bitch Sassity. And like if you know that group of people, going to small town Alberta may be a questionable choice, but it was so hilarious. We got paid so well. They tipped us incredibly. And then they made us stand on stage so every single person who came could take pictures with us because we were like stars. So our egos were inflated and they put us in a cute ass little cabin. So like seek out those gigs.
Seek out those gigs. We did turn some looks when we were all getting A&W for breakfast before driving home the next day. I think some of the older people at the A&W in Twin Butte had not gotten the memo of what was happening.
Yeah.
Seek those gigs, but also like safety in those gigs. That's what we talk about. Circling it back, like, but yeah, Sylvan Lake, so much fun. Like,
yeah, I know that Cabaret Calgary, if anybody's like a new performer or looking to perform, they're really awesome about opportunities. They have like a bunch of different stages and shows that they do. House of Hush, also they have like they do have a specific casting pool, but they're always open to like reaching out and working and learning about people and offering opportunities. I know Sinners Burlesque, they do stuff. I'm not sure if their casting is still closed, but they have like lots of opportunities and connections. And then Holly is doing a bunch of stuff at the new center.
I teach out of CPAC, which is a queer BIPOC sex worker run pole studio that arose out of, it was a bunch of the people who called out Aradia on their bullshit a couple of years ago and did the labor for that. We have opened it's a co-op, not-for-profit pole studio here in Edmonton. So if you're into pole, if you need dance space, check out CPAC. They're incredible. Sinners Burlesque for casting. I mean, we decide and ask people, but if you want to get casted, like, shoot us some messages, let us know. We cast around 4 traditional Celtic pagan holidays. So Beltane, the summer solstice, Mubon / Samhain, and Yule. So if you have anything that fits into those things, let us know. I will also be starting to produce with Latabby Lexington, a hopefully monthly. Got some meetings going, so that will be open to anybody who just is like, hey, you're like, hey, yeah, sure, we got a spot. Yeah, and I teach out of CPAC, so House of Hush is teaching. I'm teaching with Luna coming up. There's some sessions open. Learn from me and Luna and Bo Creep and Latabby Lexington.